first heard your story decades ago. Like I told you last night, we went out to dinner. I've seen pretty much every interview you've ever given. I've followed the story incredibly closely. But for people who don't know the story, let's give them the bullet points. You used to work at Area 51. And Area 51, you went like, huh?
Well, we want to be accurate.
Okay.
Area S4.
S4. Okay.
It's about 15 miles south of Area 51.
Okay.
But,
you worked in how would you describe it?
I guess within the Area 51 compound. You can call that a subset of Area 51.
And you got that job. Before that, you were working.
Before that, I had worked at Los Alamos
Right.
National Labs in New Mexico.
And you were involved in what kind of work there?
Nuclear weapon development, physics. I mean, they do everything there.
So how do they approach you to say, hey, Bob, why don't you come on out to the Nevada desert?
Well, the way this went down was, at that time, it was 1982. I put a jet engine in my Honda, and Los Alamos put it on the front page of the paper. Said, Los Alamos man, physicist at the lab, built this 200-mile-an-hour, Honda jet car that I drove to work every day. So I was known in Los Alamos, the guy with the weird car, and you could hear it from a mile away. Anyway, the day that came out on the front page of the paper was the day Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb, was giving a lecture down there at the lab. And we didn't have much going on that day in our group, and I asked if I could go down there. And I went down there early, and Ed Teller was outside, leaning on a brick wall there and reading the front page of the paper. Now, this is a guy out of history, so I introduced myself. Hey, I'm the guy you're reading about there. And we talked for a little while, and it was cool. Fast forward to years later, I had moved out to Las Vegas and had, left Los Alamos and, went on to other things. And I wanted to get back into the scientific community. I left to start other businesses and that sort of thing. So I sent resumes out, and one of them went out to Ed Teller and referenced our meeting, back in the day. And anyway, he remembered me and gave me a reference, somebody to contact at EG&G. And that's pretty much how it started.
So you get a phone call or a letter? Like, what do you get?
Well, I got what did I get? I got a letter initially and went down for an interview probably a couple times. And it was down at EG&G Special Projects, which was at McCarran Airport at that time out in Las Vegas.
And did they give you any sort of job description or what you were applying for?
They said it was for I can't remember exactly what they did. This was a long time ago, but I think it was advanced propulsion or something like that. Something relatively generic. And they said it's in a remote area. It's going to be some days on, some days off. And, it was kind of not exactly a full-time job, but you might have to be out there for 2 weeks at a time and take 2 weeks off. So it was kind of the work schedule would be kind of broken up.
And did this seem attractive to you, or did it seem weird?
No, it really wasn't weird, because people that work at the test site, anybody that's familiar with the area up there, working at the nuclear test site or at the Tonopah test range north of there, that's typically how things go.
So you had known about it from the scientific community? Because the Area 51 at that time was
No, they didn't say anything about Area 51.
Okay, so
they just said it was in a remote location, and you just know it was up at the test site.
Right.
So, but there was no mention of Area 51 at that time.
So they've done hundreds of nuclear tests in Nevada. That whole area there's giant chunks of Nevada that people.
Yeah, there's a big piece of Nevada, and it's split up into different areas. There's a nuclear test site. There's Area 51. There's the Tonopah test range north of that. There's little sub areas. There's areas where they test chemical weapons and things like that. So it's all broken up as a gigantic test area.
So take me back to first day on the job. You accept the job. They take you out there.
Yeah, it's the first day, really, I didn't really get to see a whole lot. The first day was essentially just paperwork. That's when I flew into Area 51 proper. And I left McCarran Airport and flew what they call the Janet flights. Just, a passenger plane from Las Vegas to Area 51. And it was really just going through a mountain of paperwork that day. From security clearances to, it was like 2 or 3 hours of just solid paperwork. And that was really an uneventful first day.
When did things get weird? When did you realize? Like, at what point in time did you say, hey, this is not normal work? Like, this doesn't even seem like it's from this planet.
That I can't tell you what day that occurred on because so much time has gone by. The days have kind of fused
Yeah.
into one, and I can't
Was it a
separate
slow,
the days.
was it a slow burn, or was there a moment of recognition?
Well, the first inkling I had was when I came in. There's this facility that is at S4. It's in the side of a mountain, and normally we had pulled in with the bus and gone around the front through a normal double door. This time that I went in, there were hangar doors open. I went in through the hangar door, and in the hangar door was the disc, the flying saucer that I worked on. I saw it sitting there, and we walked by it. It had a little American flag stuck on the side, and I thought, oh my God, this finally explains all the flying saucer stories. This is just an advanced fighter, and this is fucking hilarious.
Right.
So I went by, I slid my hand alongside it. I got reprimanded immediately for touching the thing. And there was a guy, an armed guard, that followed us in and just said, keep your eyes forward and your hands at your side and just walk in the door. So that was the first time I had seen anything that was weird. It was some time later that I was introduced to my lab partner, Barry. And we had some of the subcomponents of the craft in the lab. And Barry was very anxious to get a new lab partner. So he was very talkative and couldn't wait to show me different things. And it was in the demonstration of the reactor working where it caught my attention to where this is technology that doesn't even exist. So, I mean, that was the first time I knew that this is really something different.
What was it? What was it about this reactor that made you think that it didn't exist technologically?
Well, it was I actually have to back up because there were some briefings that I read it before that certainly gave me the impression that this was going to be a weird job, but this was the first hands-on thing. This was a small reactor about the size of a hemisphere, about the size of a basketball, on a metal plate, and when it was running, it produced a gravitational field of its own. Now, this is something that we can't do. We can't produce any gravity. The only way we get gravity is from large quantities of mass. But there's no machine we can have that turns on that makes gravity. Like, you can turn on an electromagnet and it makes a magnetic field. We can't make a gravitational field. Anyway, this device was producing that. And Barry said, almost like he was bragging, go ahead, try and touch the sphere. And I couldn't. It pushed my hands away, just like two like poles of a magnet. So that was...
so like when you take two magnets and try to press them together and they push against each other?
Yeah, that kind of cushion feeling, but you can't get them together. The closer you put them, the more they push. But
and you felt that physically
with
in
my
your
hand? Yeah. Now there's nothing that does that, and that immediately caught my attention. Going, wow, this is something else.
What was your thought? Like when you felt that and you knew that there was nothing that you were aware of that could produce
then
this?
that connected me to the briefings that I read on the first day at S4 was that everything that I had read was apparently accurate.
What were you reading?
I read, it was kind of an overview. This project was to back engineer the alien craft. And specifically, it was to try and back engineer and see if we can duplicate the technology with available materials. Now, to do this, they split the project into many different pieces for several reasons. They do this on all classified projects. So nobody has the complete story, but they compartmentalize everything. Now, we had the power and propulsion system. So what the briefings they gave me were like a 1 or 2 page overview of some of the other projects that were going on, on the craft. The only reason they do that is just in case what you're working on is connected intimately in some way that we don't know of to one of the other projects, you have to know their, their existence. So, again, everything from metallurgy to, weapon potential of the craft, and these were all, essentially very short briefings, but mine was just power and propulsion. And it made it very clear that what I read was accurate.
So when you were reading that, before you actually saw the reactor, what were your thoughts on what they were describing? If you knew that something like that didn't exist, and they're describing it in the briefings, what did you think you were going to see?
I didn't know at the time. I mean, I was reading, I thought, is this some kind of test?
See if you're crazy?
Well, not to see if I'm crazy. A lot of times they'll take in real high security jobs. I mean, they'll intentionally insert nonsense into them, whether it's to confuse the fact or if for someone was to leak it out, they would carry that information along and know where it came from. So I read through the documents, but, I didn't know if this was, part of some kind of test or,
Right.
Or what, or was it potentially realistic? I mean, I really didn't consider it being all that possible as far as being the actual thing that I was going to work on at the time.
How did they turn it on?
The reactor?
Yeah.
The reactor can be turned on or turned off in a lot of different ways. The way Barry showed me, the hemisphere is removed. There's a small tower in the middle. When you put the hemisphere on, the reactor activates. The reactor shuts down. It's load sensing. So if there's no load on the reactor at all, it shuts down. When there's a load present on it, it starts up again.
Load meaning?
You can consider it an electrical load. So although it doesn't necessarily operate electrically, there's no wiring that connects any of the subcomponents together whatsoever. They just have to be in the immediate vicinity. The stuff is borderline magic, and that's essentially where we left it, when I left the project.
So there was no progress made?
There was some progress. I mean, we did identify, at least we think, some processes and had a rough idea, we think, of what was going on, but I think this is a problem that they've had for a long time. And, I was replacing somebody that Barry worked with prior to me. And I think there was some horrific accident that I didn't have a whole lot of information on, but, Barry alluded to that.
A horrific accident, like where someone died, or?
Yeah, where somebody died.
Because they were trying to tamper with things or figure out how something worked?
Yeah, the reactor in particular.
But yet he let you touch it.
Yeah, I think what they were trying to do was cut into one.
Oh,
now
Jesus.
they had more than one there, and that was supposedly there was an unannounced nuclear test, and that's what it was. At the time, remember, they were still doing underground nuclear tests at the test site. But from what I understand, according to Barry, there was an attempt made. Now, this must have been a pretty desperate attempt because it's not a very scientific process to analyze something that way. But it looked like they used a plasma cutter or something like that to cut into an operating reactor.
How many of these things did they have?
They had nine craft altogether. I only got hands-on with one of them, so I can't really say how the others operated.
Did you see the other ones?
Yeah. At one time, and only one time, the bay doors between the hangars were all open, and I could see all the way through.